You're kneeling at a riverbank, and the water in front of you is the color of weak tea. Something dead is decomposing a few hundred yards upstream, and you have no way of knowing that. Insects skate across the surface. The current is slow enough that whatever's in this water has had plenty of time to settle in. You drink anyway, because there is no other option, and hasn't been for as long as your species has existed. This is roughly what people drank for most of the 300,000 years Homo sapiens has walked the planet. No filter, no boil, no label warning you what's swimming in it. Just your own senses, and whatever your parents taught you to watch for. Right now, you turn a handle and clean water arrives in under 2 seconds. You don't check it. You don't smell it. You don't wonder what died near its source last week. That convenience is so new on the timeline of your species that it barely registers as a blip. A few generations, out of roughly 12,000 since anyone started farming, out of hundreds of thousands since anyone started drinking from rivers at all. So how did ancient humans survive drinking water that, by every modern medical standard, should have been killing nearly all of them? The answer isn't luck. It's one of the oldest, quietest technologies humans ever built. Start in ancient India. A Sanskrit medical text called the Sushruta Samhita, compiled by around the 4th century CE, lays out at least 4 separate methods for treating water before anyone drank it: boil it, leave it in direct sun, plunge a piece of heated metal into it, or filter it through sand and coarse gravel. Around that same broad era, Egyptian tomb paintings dated to somewhere between the 15th and 13th century BC show devices built for the exact same job, letting sediment settle out before water ever reached a cup. Nobody involved had ever seen a bacterium. Germ theory wouldn't exist for another 3,000 years. Somebody, somewhere, simply noticed that water treated a certain way made fewer people sick, and that observation got written down, taught, and repeated, purely because it worked. Everyone assumes remedies like this were guesswork. They weren't. 2 of those exact 4 methods are still in use today. Boiling remains one of the most reliable emergency water treatments on the planet. Sunlight-based disinfection is now a formally studied technique called SODIs, recommended by global health agencies for households with no other options. Clear bottles, 6 hours of full sun, and the water is safe to drink. Around 400 BC, the Greek physician Hippocrates built his own version of the same idea, a cloth bag used to strain boiled rainwater, later nicknamed the Hippocratic sleeve. 3 different civilizations, thousands of miles apart, arrived at nearly the same conclusion without ever comparing notes. That's not a coincidence. That's what happens when the penalty for getting it wrong is severe enough, often enough, for long enough. So how did people keep refining what worked, with zero science to check their homework against? Here's where it gets older than anyone expected. In 2012, a research team led by archaeologist Xiaohong Wu published findings from Xianrendong Cave in Jiangxi Province, China. Pottery fragments recovered from the site were dated to between 19,000 and 20,000 years old, roughly 10,000 years before agriculture existed anywhere on Earth. The fragments carry scorch marks and soot. These vessels sat directly over fire. That means the technology to boil water may be one of the oldest deliberate inventions our species ever made. Mobile hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons, still found it worth the weight of carrying fragile clay pots across a landscape. Boiled water and boiled food simply kept people alive longer than the raw versions did. Everyone assumes bigger, more organized societies eventually solved the water problem for good. The opposite happened. When people gave up moving and settled into permanent villages, and then cities, their water didn't get safer. It got far more dangerous, because now thousands of households were drinking from the same river that thousands of other households used as a toilet. So what happened when that crowding finally caught up with everyone? Fast forward to London, 1854. A physician named John Snow was investigating a cholera outbreak centered on Broad Street in the Soho district, a crowded neighborhood where nearly half the households drained their waste straight into cesspools a few feet from their own water pumps. Snow mapped every death by address and found the pattern almost instantly. Fatalities clustered tightly around one specific pump. In roughly 10 days, the outbreak killed about 616 people. Snow convinced local officials to remove the pump handle. New infections dropped almost immediately. He had effectively proven, years before germ theory was accepted science, that cholera traveled through water, not through bad air, the leading theory of his time. Everyone assumes Snow's discovery ended the crisis on the spot. It didn't. Cholera kept killing people across Britain for decades afterward, until entire sewer systems were rebuilt from scratch. And the underlying problem never actually disappeared. It just moved. Unsafe water still causes roughly 1 million deaths a year worldwide, mostly from diarrheal disease. Concentrated in the places where the infrastructure Snow's discovery eventually inspired was never built. There's a more recent piece of evidence, and it's living inside people right now. In 2014, researcher Stephanie Schnorr and a team from the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology studied the gut bacteria of the Hadza, a hunter-gatherer community in Tanzania, who still drink largely untreated water from springs and streams. Comparing stool samples from 27 Hadza adults against 16 urban Italians, they found the Hadza carried significantly more diverse gut bacteria, a wider internal ecosystem, built by a lifetime of exposure to an unfiltered environment. The point isn't that dirty water is secretly good for you. It's that the human gut, over hundreds of thousands of years, adapted alongside exactly the kind of environmental exposure your tap water now shields you from completely. Your ancestors weren't only treating water on the outside, their bodies were doing quiet work on the inside, too. So what actually kept people alive? Across 300,000 years of drinking from rivers, wells, and puddles the color of weak tea, it wasn't one invention. It was the habit of paying attention, noticing which water made people sick and which didn't, testing it against smell and color and the fate of the last person who drank it, and passing that verdict down before anyone had a word for bacteria. The real technology was never the sand filter, or the clay pot, or the pump handle. It was generations of people who refused to trust water just because it looked clear. You're kneeling at that riverbank again, except this time you know what your ancestors knew. Watch the color, trust moving water over still, wait for the sun to finish its work. Now stand up, walk back into your own life, and turn the handle on your kitchen sink. Clean water arrives in under 2 seconds, and you don't check it, because 10,000 generations already checked it for you. We didn't survive dirty water by getting stronger. We survived it by getting suspicious, and we built the modern world efficient enough that suspicion is the one inherited instinct clean water finally let us forget.